This is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culture Ford. Bird Culture Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoke and Grayson Grundhafer.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into a brand new edition of the Bearcast on Sic'Em365.com, Sic'Em365 Radio. I'm Craig Smoke, joined as always by Grayson Grundhafer, and we've got quite a bit to talk about, although the news cycle is slowing down a little bit as the spring semester comes to a close, and with it, spring sports start to come to a close, but there is still quite a bit to chat about. Hope you've had a pretty good week. We are inside the Sic'Em 365 studios in the corner of MLK and Elm. And Grayson, kind of getting that feeling of, springtime starting to sort of wind down just a little bit here. And with it, obviously results, still some Baylor teams alive, but man, we are heading straight for the summertime, it feels like.
Yeah, we definitely are, but I'm excited because today we get to actually talk about a little bit of Baylor men's tennis as they're continuing to make their run, so that's fun. But yeah, things are slowing down, and that's okay. It's going to be a lot of recruiting and a lot of other content that you and I are going to have to talk about, and like we do every year, a lot of speculative kind of information, talking about previews for the season and talking about what Baylor's gonna be in the fall. And it's a lot more fun to talk about results, but it's also kind of fun to talk about what could be in the future. And so we're gonna be doing a lot of that. But today we still get to talk about at least some information, right?
Yeah, there's a little bit of stuff out there. It's slowed down, like I said, just a little in terms of the fast and furious pace of news that we were getting with, the basketball teams hitting the transfer portal and football, still alive as just a couple of weeks ago, really. But they've now started to kind of wind down. Final exams are going on. People are getting out of classes now and heading back home for the summertime. So it's starting to slow down in that regard. But there is a lot to talk about, and we're going to get into all of the headlines and news and notes. Got Jack and Armstrong behind the scenes making things happen as well, so thank you to them as always. But let's start off with a piece of news that is Baylor-related, although this might be kind of the last Baylor-related thing we talk about with this young man, but Gary Bohannon, former Baylor quarterback now, of course the starter last year, and then gets hurt. Blake Shapen comes in, takes over, leads him to a Big 12 title, and Gary comes back and is the quarterback for the Sugar Bowl. And, got his big opportunity last year to be the starter at the beginning of the year after winning that quarterback competition. And less than a year later, this is the world of college football. He is in the transfer portal after the spring practices were over, and Dave Aranda commenced to name a starter in Blake Shapen, or at least reports came out that Blake Shapen was the starter, and then subsequently Gary Bohannon enters the transfer portal. Well, Grayson, a couple weeks later, we finally know his destination, and Gary Bohannon's going to continue his college career at the University of South Florida, joining up with the Bulls out in Tampa. He let that be known over the weekend with a graphic on Instagram. So, we're not going to, clearly follow his South Florida career all that much and talk too much about it because it's a different conference. It's a different everything, really. And I'm certainly going to track Gary and see how he does. But, your thoughts on just, him finding a destination and it being USF.
Yeah, it's college football for you, isn't it? Because he's ending up at USF. The loser of the quarterback battle last year, Jacob Zeno, is likely going to start at UAB. So you got two guys that are going to be playing and starting at another school after losing the quarterback competition at Baylor. I think that kind of speaks to the depth that Baylor had developed in that quarterback room and kind of the quality that they had in the room as well. Now, as far as Gary going to USF, I think this is a great landing spot for him. I know there were reports that he took a visit to Oklahoma and they took a visit to Missouri as well, but he ends up at the group of 5 level. And to me, this is a clear sign of I want to go somewhere and I want to be the guy. And he goes to USF, he is going to be the guy. There's no doubt about it. If you look at the quarterbacks on the roster at USF, they were really bad a year ago. This team went 2-10. Their starting quarterback, Timmy McClain, 1,888 yards, 5 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, only completed 55% of his passes. He was not good at all for them a year ago. Their backups didn't fare any better. So now Gary's going to come in there, and I think what Gary's going to bring for them is kind of a better ability completion percentage wise. He's going to be more accurate than the quarterbacks on the roster. He's going to be a better athlete than the quarterbacks on the roster as well. And I think this is a great opportunity for an offense to really open him up a little bit more and allow him to be more of a factor in the run game, especially the power run game. They're going to rely on him a lot. They have a really good wide receiver returning as well at USF. So I think things are kind of aligning for Gary to really be set loose in that offense. Now, does that mean they're going to win a ton of games? Probably not. But I do think for Gary, I think it's going to allow him to really grow as a quarterback and develop as more than a game manager, which is what he was at Baylor. Yeah,
he'll definitely be their focal point, I would imagine. And, it is funny to me, and this is no disrespect to Gary, but it's just, and I'm sure Baylor fans or Baylor media have been guilty of it with certain guys as well. But just the excitement level, USF, I'm glad that they're excited for it, but I see some of these reporters make comments about his game, and I'm like, did you watch any of him? It's like, this is massive, and I'm like, well, it's pretty big, I guess, but it's not like, Peyton Manning's walking through the door or anything like that. It's kind of crazy to me, and I think that's why the transfer portal gets people so excited, is that they just get so excited about just adding a guy that it's funny and it's great. It's great that the transfer portal creates all that excitement, but I think they need to temper expectations already a little bit down there. No disrespect, because some of the responses I saw, he's good. I think he'll thrive down there, but he does have some things to work on. He is not a polished product by any means, but I'm not saying that to take away from Gary at all. It's just interesting when you've been living in this world with Gary for the last 4 years and seeing what people say, and then you see another fan base get him, and then you see the way that they talk about him, and it's just interesting to see the differences.
I will say, from a look at what you have on the roster perspective compared to Gary, I can see why they're thrilled, because it's just, he's so much better than what they have on their roster. So I understand that perspective. I just think it's super interesting that when he entered the portal, everyone was talking about, Missouri, D1, Power 5. He's going to go and be a no-question starter somewhere. And, this is the portal. That sometimes does not happen. And honestly, most times that does not happen. Even though he has a full year of production, he's ending up on a 2-10 team. That's just kind of how it works out sometimes. But the thing of it is I think he's going to do some great things there. I think he's going to help elevate that program over the next 2 years, because I do think he'll be in college for 2 more years. And he'll give them some reliability and leadership there. So I'm happy for him. Tampa's a really cool place to be as well. So he's going to have a lot of fun there, I think, and be able to really thrive down at USF. So I'm happy for Gary. I think he's going to do some great things. But overall, I think at this point, it's just one of those things where you go, this is why Blake Shapen won the job. Like, Blake Shapen was just a better quarterback, and now we can all sit back and cheer for he and Jacob Zeno at their 2 landing spots.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see there's excitement for him. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad that there's some buzz now for Gary, and he's going to a place where it looks like he's going to be appreciated, and I think he was here too, but I think that they're, buzzing to have him come down to Tampa. So that's good for Gary Bohannon, and we'll see, where it takes him and all of that. But he's going to need some help, that's for sure. And like you mentioned, they apparently have a pretty good wide receiver, but that's been a program that's been kind of hobbling along the last few years, and they could certainly use some juice from him and some of that standard that he brought and things like that. So all best wishes to Gary Bohannon as he's now found his next destination, and he's got a couple years of eligibility left.
2.
Yeah. So he's got an opportunity to really kind of settle in there and make his mark. And I'd love nothing more than to see him, going in the NFL draft in a couple years, getting picked up. But obviously a lot of work still to do there before that happens. And that work will happen in Tampa, Florida. So good luck to him. And that was one piece of big news elsewhere. Josh White, former LSU linebacker, and we can stop saying that kind of now because he's been accepted into school. He's now been recently on his visit, and pretty soon here in the next few weeks he'll actually be moving to Waco. But obviously a big pickup out of the transfer portal. Grayson, I was able, the last question that Dave Aranda answered in spring ball was about Josh White when I realized we could talk about him, and was able to get it in there real quick and get his thoughts. And he just, glowed about Josh White, the person, and his family, and all those types of things. And then, he's a pretty good player too. He was sporting what was the number 44, I think, in his visit jersey. But yeah, saw some pictures of him.
Great linebacker
from
number.
Yesterday. Yeah, that's a good linebacker number. So explain, this is his official visit that he was on this past weekend?
Yeah, so he took his unofficial visit at the beginning of April. That's when he committed and everything like that. Right after that visit, he committed to Dave Aranda and the staff. And then this was his official visit. So that one was an unofficial. This is his official. He still had that available. So he was like, I'm going to go ahead and take it and just spend some time in Waco and just spend some time with the coaching staff and with some of the players, especially Drake Dabney. They're pretty close. And so I think it was just an opportunity for him to get on campus and kind of get a feel for what life's going to be like when he gets to Waco here in the next month. It'll be early June when he arrives and officially enrolls. So that's kind of where we're at with him. Obviously, this is massive just to get him back on campus and just solidify things. There was never any doubt, though, that, he was a Bear the moment he stepped on Baylor's campus the first time. He left a Bear, and he continues to be a Bear. So he'll enroll in June and is going to give them a potential starter at the will linebacker position. He's definitely going to come in and compete and be a big part of what they're trying to do for the future on that defense.
Yeah, definitely look like he doesn't need to put too much weight on. Already looks pretty filled out, looks good. Granted, he's been in the LSU strength and conditioning department now for the last couple years, so not as though he's like a baby-faced freshman walking in. So he's got some size on him already, and I know there's a lot of intangibles that people like. So cool to see Josh White on his official visit, taking pictures on the field of McLean Stadium in the all-yellow. So he chose the all-yellow for his pictures, which is interesting because some people – that's like their least favorite one. But I do know some people that like him, and clearly Josh White does. Also him holding the Big 12 championship trophy and admiring that as well. So cool to get a couple of shots of him in a Baylor uniform. And soon we'll see him actually out at McLean Stadium and playing for the Bears and, hopefully being the star that a lot of people think that he can be on the defensive side. So you got one player in, one player out, basically, with Bohannon to Tampa and Josh White from Baton Rouge to Waco. Elsewhere, football-wise, you mentioned 247, I guess, has got some preseason rankings out, and I guess it's got people talking. And the Bears are at number 5, I guess, according to these rankings.
Yeah, I guess it's CBS Sports rankings, and 247 did an article on it with their take on the rankings, I suppose, is kind of how that worked out. And the Big 12 had 4 teams inside the top 20. So it was Oklahoma State at 20, Texas at 17, Baylor at number 5, and Oklahoma at number 4. The top 5 go Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Baylor. I guess my first takeaway, and judging by you kind of laughing, is Oklahoma should not be number 4 in the nation.
Number 4? Like,
what are we doing?
Like, I mean, I'm as unbiased as it's going to get here, in terms of I don't have a hatred for Oklahoma, quite the opposite. So, maybe unbiased isn't the word, but I don't know. I think I'm pretty fair with the teams that I like. I don't gloss over weaknesses, and some people can be very ignorant with their teams. I'm very realistic with the teams that I follow. That is a ridiculous ranking for Oklahoma, number 4. That is absurd. That is way too high.
I agree with you. I mean, the track record of Big 12 coaches getting a first-year head coach is not great. I think there's probably a better chance that Oklahoma goes 8-4 than they are number 4 in the entire country.
I would just like to know the rationale behind that, and I'm sure they have a nice little paragraph written that explains it. I don't need to see it, but I mean, yeah, man, a coaching change. I get that. Oh, cool, it's Levy's offense, and he knows Dylan Gabriel. Okay, but Dylan Gabriel's a step down from what they had last year at quarterback
by a lot.
I can't even tell you some of their skill guys at this point because most of them are living in Los Angeles now, or were drafted like a Kennedy Brooks. Defensively, I'm sure they're going to be better with Brent Venables in charge, but I mean, I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking at that tells me that's the number 4 team in the country.
Yeah, the paragraph is not. It's literally not explaining it at all. It's like
so it's BS, basically.
Much of their worth hinges on Brent Venables' defense in year 1, along with the progression of UCF transfer Dylan Gabriel. It has nothing to do with, oh, this is a great part of their team, or, oh, this is something that they're going to excel at. I'm just so confused by this because I think if you're ranking Oklahoma right now, I don't know how you have them honestly inside the top 10. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think they can compete in the Big 12 if everything goes perfectly, but just the track record, it's going to be very hard for Brent Venables, a first-year head coach, to step in there and have the same success that Oklahoma's had over the past few years. Not to mention, Lincoln Riley took a lot of their team. They're kind of installing a new way of going about things. They're trying to be more defensive-oriented with Brent Venables. I just feel like those things take a little bit of time. And so to me, having them at 4 is pretty awful, even though I do think they will be, a top 3 or 4 team in the Big 12. That doesn't correlate to being a top 4 team in the country.
No, that's a ridiculously high rating that really has no merit behind it whatsoever. I mean, that doesn't have a logical explanation for them being number 4 when you could look at so many other teams. I don't even like Baylor at 5. I think that's too high in my opinion, but I would take them at 5 over the Oklahoma ranking at number 4. I just don't get that. Top 25, top 15 even, like, sure, yeah, but top 4, no. Now, as far as Baylor at number 5, that seems kind of high, man. Like, I understand they got a lot coming back. I understand that people think they could be better than next year, but, man, I'm going to have to see it, dude. That was a special collection of talent and a special chemistry and a years in the making roster. I don't think you just simply plug and play. Now, am I saying I don't think they can win 10 games again or 10-plus games again or the Big 12 again? No, I think they can do all of those things, but I don't know that I would be confident at top 5 in the country right now at this point. I still got a lot of questions about this offense before I get into top 5 talk.
Yeah, I mean, this is the highest ranking I've seen all offseason so far, post-spring kind of
Who did
reaction.
These rankings? Yeah, I don't want to rake anybody over the coals. Never mind. Don't worry about it.
It was CBS, but I just think for Baylor, though, it's so interesting because, yes, I do think when you look at the number 5 ranking, you go, man, that might be too high, right? But I also am looking at the teams around them, and I'm like, well, okay, so you got Michigan at 6. I mean, okay, maybe Michigan's better than Baylor. I don't know that that's a given. At 7, you have A&M. Again, A&M, really? I don't know if they're better than Baylor. Then you look at 8, you got Notre Dame, maybe. First year, this is Marcus Freeman's first full season, so who knows? Maybe they're better than Baylor. And then you got Utah and Arkansas. I'm taking Baylor over both of them. That's your top 10. I mean, it's not that crazy to think about. If you're going to have Utah and Arkansas in there, maybe you have Baylor at 8. Maybe they fit in more there. But I still think if you look kind of outside the top 3, which I do think they got right at this time of the year when you're talking about Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia, I think that's very fair. It's kind of up in the air with these other schools, and that top 10 is not really strong to me.
No, it's very weak.
It's very weak, but I also think they're missing, like, Clemson isn't ranked inside the top 10. Clemson.
I was just thinking about them.
Yeah, they're a top 10 team. But outside of that, I mean, it's kind of an interesting year. I think a lot of teams have a lot of question marks. And so for Baylor to be ranked anywhere from, honestly, 4 to about 10, I think it is the sweet spot right now, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool. Good for them. I mean, these mean nothing really. It's good for off-season attention, and it's just, people's opinions. Obviously, just like we're giving ours here, it just seems a little jarring to see them as a top 5 team after, losing their quarterback, losing their receivers, losing their running backs, losing their top 2 defensive players and longtime captains. I mean, losing their entire secondary, basically. That's a lot. That's a lot of change, but I understand everybody's gone, through some change as well. So maybe it's just one of those years that's sort of wide open. But yeah, it makes sense when you look around them and you see like, oh yeah, I mean, they're totally capable of being better than those teams, but that does sound like a pretty weak pack of contenders. If you can barely even muster together a strong top 10.
Arkansas in the top 10 is fascinating, but I think for Baylor's purposes, they are going to have the best defensive line, offensive line combo in the Big 12. They'll probably have top 5 in the country in that regard. They're very deep at both positions. So I found that interesting. Now, we do have to talk about the other 2 really quick. Oklahoma State at 20 and Texas at 17. 17 after a 5-7 season. I find that to be very interesting. They are ahead of Oregon, Wisconsin, Oklahoma State, Wake Forest, BYU, Houston, Penn State, and Cincy. Do you think that's fair for the Longhorns after 5 and 7?
I mean, it's actually putting them probably where they should be more often than where they are put, in like the top 10 every year, because maybe this year we'll be right, they've been saying for 15 years in a row now. Yeah, I mean, dude, the whole Texas, I mean, we're doing exactly what people do by putting Texas into their top 25s just to get people talking, That's why I'm surprised they're as low in that one as they are, because typically they overrate them even more to really get a, argument going. But I mean, they have made a lot of changes. Like if they're not, like now they're starting to kind of do the thing where they're downplaying the expectations. And, after being overrated time and time and time again for the most part, now it's like, we've got probably more talent than we've had, and I know that's been the thing every year too, but we've gone and got all this talent, basically Alabama's second string. And then, they're going and getting Quinn Ewers, and they've got Bijan, and they've got Worthy, and they go and get like 2 of the top portal receivers. And I mean, they should be top 15, top 20. I mean, that should be a guarantee no matter what every single year for Texas. So I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think at some point they're going to have to be better than expectations say, and maybe that's this year. I'm not all in on they're just going to go win the Big 12 with all these additions right away, but I do think they should be better this year. If they're not better this year, I know there will be like, well, you got to give it time, but like they should be better this year. If they're not, dude, then that's alarming to me with all of the transfer changes they've made and those types of things. That would be worrisome to me if they are not significantly better this year.
I would agree with that. I do think they are a top 25 team. My issue is there's no way they should be ranked ahead of Oklahoma State at this time.
I don't think Oklahoma State's the 20th best team in the country. No, that's ridiculous.
And Texas should not be ahead of them. That's just kind of the main point of this is I do think Oklahoma State deserves to be in that top 3 after the season they just had and what they have returning. But yeah, Texas, very solid. They've added a lot. Now it's just a question of can this all-star team come together? And is Quinn Ewers actually really, really good, or is he just okay? Those are going to be some of the questions that need to be answered. I do think there's a high ceiling for this Texas team, but we say that every single year. They actually have to go out and put that on the football field. So we'll see. I still think they're a little bit soft on the offensive and defensive lines, which is a problem when you play in the Big 12. There are some really much more improved offensive and defensive line plays over the last 5 years. So we'll see if they can kind of adapt in that regard. But I did find it interesting. Number 17, I think they're more like 23 or 24, and I think Oklahoma State is more like 15, 16, 17.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd have Oklahoma State above them. Now, granted, they do still have Spencer Sanders, so that can either bump you up or bump you down, depending on what game you're watching on any given week. They're kind of quietly going through their offseason. They've sort of flown under the radar, I feel like, in terms of a news cycle. Lost obviously some key pieces. Malcolm Rodriguez, you were talking about when I walked in here a second ago.
Jim Knowles has gone to Ohio State.
Jim Knowles is gone. They lost Kobe Hall-Rapeel as well.
They did, and Tanner McAllister followed Jim Knowles.
So there's some pieces that are off that defense, and then their offense was just okay. Like, it was not even that great. It was, again, it's what Spencer Sanders are you getting? And that's a flip of the quarter, flip of the coin, basically. But, yeah, I would have them higher than Texas. They're deserving of that, but Oklahoma's rated way too high. And then outside of the rest of the Big 12, I think it's just kind of a crapshoot. I think you could throw just about anybody in at like 24, and I wouldn't really question it too much. I think this is a very interesting year. It's a lot of change is taking place, either coaches-wise or rosters-wise, and here's Baylor with the target on their back now, and they're set up pretty well. So this should be a fun season. It's just going to be hard to live up to last year. I mean, last year was just one of those once-in-a-lifetime type of seasons where not everything went right, but ultimately everything did go right that needed to, and it was just special. So if they can follow that up with anything similar, that would be a great sign for Dave Aranda and company. But it is going to be a very strange Big 12 and very curious Big 12 with still another 3 months to go for anybody out there in theory to change up even more between now and the opening kickoff. So That was it as far as Big 12 teams go?
That was it, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, 4, I think that's about right. I think there's so many questions with the other teams in the Big 12. I think you and I pretty much agree on that. You know, there are some teams that, you know, could get in there at some point, but I think after spring ball, probably those 4 teams are the safest bets to win the Big 12 championship. So, yeah, it was an interesting conversation, though, to kind of see, you know, how the media is kind of perceiving the Big 12, and to see Oklahoma and Baylor that high, whether deserving or not, is very fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Very curious, that ranking right there. I'll believe that when I see that. You know, part of me would be happy with them doing that, but yeah, I'm not buying that right now. I haven't talked to my Oklahoma family in a while. I'm curious. I know they love Brent Venables because they did before he was even hired. And then when I talked to him briefly after he was hired, they were pretty excited about him. Again, you got to remember they haven't had New in forever because Lincoln Riley was just a basically, you know, move over one spot. They didn't go through a whole search. So this whole search thing's been very eye-opening, I think, for that fan base. And just, you know, having to deal with change and having to deal with getting picked on a little bit in some cases is all new to them. So this is going to be a very, very interesting year with Brent Venables.
They had a great showing for their spring game. So a lot of support, which is something.
Well, you know, Nebraska has for like 2 decades too.
Well, yeah.
No, I know what you're saying. I'm not trying to dismiss it. It's just like there's part of me that gets triggered when you say that, because that's like the stuff that you start to talk about when not everything else is the stuff that you used to talk about. It's like all of a sudden Nebraska used to talk about championships, and now they're like, we had the highest spring game total, and that's like their big thing. Unfortunately, nowadays, is being able to do things like that.
I think this is more like OU's been good forever, and it's like, oh, and they still have good spring game attendance even without Lincoln. So I think there's a lot of support for Venables, and I think it's easy for Oklahoma fans to have a lot of support for him because it kind of matches hatred for Lincoln Riley at this point.
Yeah.
And then you got Bob Stoops obviously being a huge part of that program, so they're going to be just fine, and they're going to be good at some point. I just don't know if they're going to be elite year one. I think that's just asking a lot out of Brent Venables, a new offensive staff, a new quarterback. I don't know. I feel like that's a little too high.
Yeah, we will see if they can live up to that here in the next few months. Elsewhere, men's tennis in the round of 16 now, Grayson, as Michael Woodson and company move on to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. And your thoughts on them opening up with a couple of wins and being able to move themselves. It was dicey against A&M there towards the end, but they were able to pull out a victory.
Yep, and in the tournament, you need your best players to thrive. And Adrian Boiton finished that match against A&M, and it was needed. 4-2 was the final. It looked like Baylor was going to run away with it at one point, and then A&M just crept back in it. They started making the matches much, much closer, but Baylor finished them off, advanced, and now on Friday they'll take on Stanford. Stanford, again, pulled off a little bit of a shocker, knocking off number 14 ranked Harvard 4-3. So a really close match there. Baylor has a decisive advantage here against Stanford. Kind of going through the matchups that I've seen, Baylor should win the doubles point very easily. Stanford not great on doubles. Baylor has to win that point. They have a very nice advantage there. Boiton should win his match, and that's 2-0 right off the bat, is what it should be. And you kind of look going through the matchup. I have it 5-2 if I was going to go through all the matchups for Baylor. So depending on how it finishes, it could be, final could be 4-2, it could be 4-0, it could be 4-1. But right now I do expect Baylor to advance to the Elite Eight, where they will take on the winner of Florida State versus Tennessee. Florida State shocked number 11 ranked Georgia 4-3, and Tennessee got past Duke 4-1. I fully expect Tennessee to beat Florida State, and that sets up a rematch of Baylor versus Tennessee from earlier this year. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see kind of what Michael Woodson can put on display, and kind of if they can just continue to rack up wins and get back to the Final Four. And I think that I think they're going to get there. I think they're going to get to the Final Four. I think they're going to get past Tennessee and make a little bit of noise in the tournament once again.
Well, good luck to those guys. It was a nice win over Texas A&M, and Always good to beat the Aggies. Meanwhile, the Aggies got their measure on the women's side, ending their season. So you had a little bit of a trade-off there. But I think with this men's team, you're happy about them moving on because they do have a chance to perhaps do something pretty special with this roster. So congrats again to those guys, and now best of luck here over the next few days as they get the round of 16 underway. So that's kind of the headliner right now for spring sports, I would say, is men's tennis and their direction. You've still got track and field going on, and gosh, what's ended now? You've still got
baseball going on, as they are now one game out of the basement in the Big 12, as Kansas snuck out one win against Kansas State. So that's going to be very interesting. I know we've talked about this. Baylor's got to make the Big 12 tournament. But right now, Kansas 4-14, Baylor 5-13, K-State 6-12. Baylor takes on Kansas State this weekend in a 3-game series. It is getting very dicey at the bottom of the Big 12.
Yeah, and they didn't even play this week.
Well, they played Tarleton, a week? Was it
a week
midweek?
Ago?
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't play anybody this weekend, so they just had to sit back and watch. But, next to last in the Big 12 by a game over Kansas. So that's where they sit right now. And 23-22 on the year. Have won a couple in a row, but 5-13 in Big 12 play. That's just not going to cut it. And I understand there's 3 really good programs at the top with Oklahoma State and TCU and Texas Tech and Texas. There's 4. But man, that's tough.
The more damning stat is they're 4-18 against top 50 teams. I mean, this team has just been terrible against good teams. They've kind of not even feasted on bad teams, but they've just been absolutely awful against teams with a pulse, tournament teams basically. So, yep, their RPI 71. I just, come out with some pride and knock off Kansas State, ensure your spot in the Big 12 tournament, and then go from there, because they're probably not beating Oklahoma State. So just go out and try to play from, just try to get victories, get a little momentum for this program going into the Big 12 tournament. Who knows? A couple days, maybe they get it all together and find a way to win the Big 12 tournament. Likely, no, but possible, sure.
Anything's possible, sure. Got to make it first, right?
Yep.
Got to make that tournament, which they are in danger of not doing, depending on how the results go over these next few days. So definitely need to get some wins to ensure that they get that opportunity to maybe go and make some noise. And really just kind of the final note, Jacoby Walter, a big-time hoops prospect, has some Baylor interest and vice versa. What can you tell us, or what would you like to talk about with Jacoby Walter?
Yeah, so obviously Baylor has Miro Little committed in the 2023 class, the prospect out of Finland who's now moving to the States for his final season of high school basketball. So that'll be really cool to see for him. But Jacoby Walter, McKinney High School prospect, he's actually moving to Sunrise Christian, which is where Kendall Brown played last year. The Baylor staff has a great relationship with the coaches at Sunrise Christian. So I'm excited for Jacoby to make that move. And, it kind of stinks because obviously it's cool to see him play high school basketball in the state of Texas, but he's going to get to be on more of a national stage this year. He's 6'6", 185 pounds, 5-star prospect. Baylor has had an in-home visit with him. They had one at the end of April. They have an official visit scheduled for mid-June, so he'll be on campus in June. And right now they're in a great position, and a lot of it is because Alvin Brooks III, those two, he and Jacoby Walter have an awesome relationship, and that's kind of been built over the past year and a half. Baylor was his first offer in June of 2020, so really, really great relationships with all of the Baylor staff. And I think Baylor's in the lead right now in his recruitment based on everything I've kind of heard. He's taken official visits to Alabama, Texas, and Auburn, which means he only has 2 more remaining. One is to Baylor, and I think he'll probably take one to UCLA. At least that's the other school that seems to be trending towards an official visit. But the fact of the matter is he didn't commit on any of those official visits. So I think Baylor's in a great position right now. Kind of background on him: as a junior at McKinney, averaged 24.7 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, 2.5 steals, shot 53% from the floor, 40% from 3. They made the state championship game there at McKinney, so tremendous in high school. And then he moves over to the Adidas circuit plays for Team Trae Young, and he's been averaging 28.3 points per game. The dude is an absolute scorer. I think he's a top 15 prospect in the entire country, and a guy who really, anywhere he goes, can step in and be an instant contributor for whatever roster he goes to. And if you look at Baylor, kind of their roster makeup situation, you basically have Keontae George for 1 year, and then let's say Keontae leaves, and then you kind of replace him with Jacoby Walter. Obviously, Miro Little will also probably have a big say in kind of that playing time as well with Baylor's 3 guard lineups. So very intrigued by this. I think Jacoby would fit really well with what Baylor's trying to do on the offensive and defensive side. So this is a huge one. His top 8 was UCLA, Seton Hall, Auburn, Kansas, Alabama, Texas, and Oklahoma. And right now, I think Baylor sits at the top of that list.
I would hope so. I mean, other than maybe 1 or 2 of those schools you mentioned, there's not a better program, in the running than maybe a Kansas and maybe one of those others that you mentioned there. So, yeah, basketball recruiting has remained pretty intense and very interesting as they try to kind of just keep massaging this roster and also, looking ahead to the years to come. Although you can't look too far ahead in basketball, obviously. You kind of got like a 1 year and out sort of view sometimes, it feels like. But that 1 year looks pretty good from the way it's set up right now, and obviously looking to add more firepower. So one to keep an eye on, Jacoby Walter, when it comes to Scott Drew and company. And congrats to Scott Drew on his book and making the media rounds and doing all of that. So got that going on with men's basketball. You got football. Obviously, they're in the weight room more than anything right now. Congrats to Gary Bohannon on his transfer. And, just spring sports moving on along and the news cycle moving on along. And anything else news-wise before we get in the mailbag?
I don't think so. I think that's it. We got great questions this week, actually.
All right, let's start off with Gunny. Oh, yeah, Grayson, really.
Well,
you're
except
dead on,
for this
man.
one.
Does Ashley look fat in those pants? Boy, we're really starting off with the...
Starting strong.
Yeah.
No idea the inside joke.
Okay, yeah, I don't know what the reference to that is. Some picture I'm imagining of some sort, but Gunny, sure, he does look fat in this. But no, I don't know. I don't even know what picture we're referring to. Scotty B, the Baylor King, which Baylor football incoming player enrolling in the summer is a true freshman will make the most impact, in your opinion?
Yeah, see, this is tough because this team has a lot of guys that early enrolled, and then they're also pretty deep at most every position except for one, and that's wide receiver. And so I think Jordan Neighbors could come in and contribute right away, but we'll see what this roster looks like at the end of the spring, because if they add a transfer, something along those lines, that would definitely make things a little bit cloudier for Neighbors, but I do think he could come in and contribute early. I also think Kyan Roberts-Day is an intriguing one as kind of just an offensive weapon if he does stay on the offensive side at 6'4", 270 pounds. Those would be my 2 best bets because they're pretty loaded at the other positions.
Yeah, I mean, this is about the time of year to start asking about freshmen and all that, but, I think it's going to be hit or miss as far as those guys contributing. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of guys who are asked to contribute, but in terms of, coming in and making giant splashes and all of that, I'm not expecting that much out of this class right away. I mean, I just don't see, outside of receiver, I don't necessarily see the need for big splashes from some of these incoming guys. You want to see guys like get out there and play and earn their spots and everything, but fortunately for Baylor, there's not going to be a heavy reliance, I guess is what I'm saying, on the younger guys to pull massive amounts of weight.
Yeah, no COVID year for these guys, so Baylor is going to want to use the red shirt much more liberally, I would think. They're going to want to use it and really utilize it, and so, play guys 4 games, but also just understand, like, hey, we're going to need you for the future, and we don't need to waste your year as well. That's going to be a big part of it.
Yeah, but I do think those are some good candidates that you mentioned there. Scotty also asked, toughest 3 Big 12 road games for Baylor football this year, in your opinion?
So only in the Big 12. Well, Oklahoma and Texas are definitely 2 of them. So we got 1 more to fill. Oh, man, I'm going to go with that trip to Morgantown. That is always a tough trip. It's a Thursday night in Morgantown. I don't love that setup at all. So I'll go with those 3.
I'm going to go with Iowa State. I'm going to go with West Virginia, and I'm going to go with Texas Tech as the toughest 3 road games. I understand Texas and Oklahoma, the big brands and all that, but you could go with any order you want and choose whoever you want, but I'm going to go with Definitely Texas Tech. Definitely Iowa State early on because that's late September. That's a big kind of fork in the road game for you once again, where you should be 3-0 because you hopefully beaten BYU at their place in week number 2. You should definitely have wins against Albany and Texas State, and then kind of like last year, that first like big Big 12 game is Iowa State. We know how close it was last year in Ames. I know they're not expected to be as good, but that's why I think they'll probably be better than they were last year in some ways. Even though the talent might not be the same, I think that focus and direction for them next year will be a lot better than when they actually had expectations and clearly wanted to shun those expectations and pretend like, no, we're still just little Iowa State. Remember, we're not supposed to have expectations, Matt Campbell. We're just having fun, just out there playing ball.
Well, they're going to keep doing that just with less talent.
Yeah,
So-
but I think that like now there's not expectations as much as there was last year. So I think that they're going to be a pretty good team, and just playing in Ames, like that crowd hates Baylor. Those fans hate Baylor, and so I expect it to be hostile. And the last couple times out there, it's been kind of wonky. So I could see where that would be early on in the season, kind of a tough game.
Yeah, I think Baylor is going to beat Iowa State, and I think they're going.
I hope you're right.
I think they're going to beat up on Texas Tech. I just don't think Tech is ready for the kind of physicality that Baylor's about to bring to them. I mean, they don't even have to throw the ball that game. I just think they're just too physical for them.
Too physical for Tech?
Yeah, year one, yeah. They're going to be in the trenches. I don't think Tech has the talent right now to match what Baylor's going to bring to the table in the run game. They're so good on the offensive and defensive lines. Year one under Joey, I mean, that's going to be really a tough ask.
Yeah, but this is talking about road games. It's not talking about who's the best teams that are playing. This has like toughest road games. That Lubbock crowd is going to be insane.
Well,
are you kidding me?
The crowd will be, but I'm much more weary of the talent at Oklahoma because you're going there. I mean,
that's fine. I'm talking about tough road games. Like we're just looking at it from two different angles.
Yeah.
I'm looking at hostility and like tough place to play and all of that. And you're looking at who the
Most
best
likely
teams
to
are.
lose.
Yeah. So we're looking at two different things. Give me your over under a number of conference wins for football 6. I'll say over.
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
Or no, conference wins. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll say even. I don't know how many conference games they play. 9, 6 and 3,
6 and 3.
Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take the break even on that.
Yeah, I'll take 6 or over. So I guess over. Yeah.
Men's basketball 13.
Over.
Yeah, I'll say over. Women's basketball 13.
Over.
Yeah, I'll say over as well.
That's a pretty good year for Baylor sports right there. But I think they're going to be good at all 3.
Yeah, I mean, they should be. No reason not to be with what they've got coming back in all 3 sports. I would expect that, next year is going to be hard to kind of follow up on, year after year after year, but that's how you build these incredible programs. And they certainly have the opportunity to do that in all 3 of those sports, is to keep the momentum going, or in some cases, create even more momentum for themselves, like in women's basketball, for example, because the season didn't necessarily end the way that you wanted to. Men's basketball either, but they're clearly in a good direction and pick up where they left off and take it to a different level. Julius Pleaser, I'm glad Gary found a landing spot at USF. You think he saw what happened to Charlie at Utah and decided, that's not going to be me. I'll go to a P6 spot where I'm sure to be the man, easier competition, and more of a chance to shine, no?
I just don't think he was promised a starting job. Like, Charlie was promised the starting job at Utah. That was very clear. He was going to be the starter. Cam Rising was coming off of injury. I just don't think Gary, at any of the Power 5 stops, did they say, you're going to be the starting quarterback. So I think it's a little bit different of a situation, but I do kind of agree with the premise of he'll probably be more successful at USF than he would have been at a Power 5 school. I guess that's fair enough, but I don't necessarily think it was his decision to go, I'm going to go P6. I just think he went to the place where he could start and be, a starter day one.
Yeah, I don't think he was analyzing it that much. All due respect to him. I'm sure he's smart enough to have looked at it that way. But I think, it was just the spot that made the most sense to play pretty much right away. The Missouri thing, sure, you can go play in the SEC, but you're not guaranteed a starting spot. And you don't have the best coaching either. So it's like, I think just ultimately this works out well for Gary from pretty much every angle. Competition-wise, starting role-wise, talent-wise, all that stuff. And he's going to be the man down there. If he had gone some other places, not just at the quarterback spot, but just in general, he might not be the man. But in Tampa, he's already the guy. Now, they're just since committing a couple of days ago, they're already, super excited about him. So that's great for Gary. But, we'll see how it goes, obviously, starting here in the next couple months. I do wish him the best. But that's interesting, Julius. I appreciate the question. C. Midness, which 3 to 5 prospects do the staff need to secure an official visit this summer?
I mean, a lot of guys have already set up official visits, so I guess I'll just kind of go through a few of those guys. I don't know, unless he's saying like name random off topic guys who don't have an official visit.
I mean, I think he's looking for who are the top 3 to 5 guys that they need to get an official visit from.
Okay, all right. So Terence Greene, I think, is one. He's defensive lineman out of Cy Woods. He's definitely one that I'm thinking they need to get on campus for an official. I would say DK Kalu out of Ridge Point, the nose tackle, along with Samu Tamanu Pepe as well out of Atascocita. Those two they need just because nose tackle, right? They need to address that position in this class. Both of those guys would be very nice guys to have on visits. Trayon Webb, the running back out of Jacksonville, Florida, getting him on an official visit would be huge. Very productive, elite talent. And a very high ceiling, I think, in Jeff Grimes' offense. And then one that is kind of more of like a I just think it'd be cool to get this guy on campus type thing is Waxahachie cornerback Calvin Simpson-Hunt. He's also a Texas Tech commit. So getting him on an official visit, I think, would be really good. He's blowing up right now, got Ohio State, Notre Dame type offers recently. I think he's a very, very good cornerback prospect to go along with the guys that are already in good positions with like Chance Rucker and Tayshaun Wilson and Jalen Braxton.
Which is more likely this season, Shapen throws for 3,500 yards or a running back eclipses 1,000? That's a tough question.
I'm going to go with running back eclipses 1,000.
That's where I'm leaning to.
Yeah. I just think they run it so much that someone will get either really close or get there. I think Squirrel will get past 1,000.
Yeah, I mean, Abram...
1,600 for Abram.
Yeah, but he had a lot of carries too. Like, I mean, he was getting at least 20 a game pretty much. I don't know that they're going to have anybody on the team this year who's going to be getting 25 a pop or anything like that. I mean, Tay would be the closest example, and I don't know that he's fully ready to just go out there and do that week in and week out.
I mean, Treston had 800 yards on just 148 carries, which is super impressive.
Yeah.
There's a lot of yards to be had.
Yeah, so. I mean, I'll go with the 1,000 yards. Just choosing between the two, I think, that's probably the most likely. But, yeah, if they can get another 1,000-yard rusher, that would be great. It had been a little while since they had done that, I believe, before Abram did it last year. So that was good to see, and good to see him not only get that but crush it.
Yeah, I think Shapen will get close to 3,500 too, though. Like, just kind of also answering that part of the question, I think he could get right around that with the play action stuff that they do and the fact that they may not just turn around and hand the ball off as much because they don't have an Abram. So maybe.
Yeah, I mean, either are possible. That's the good news. Both could happen, actually, but I'll go with the 1,000-yard running back. Thank you, C. Midness. Baylor 1984, with the explosion of the transfer portal, will there ever be a day when it's close to 50-50 of high school recruits versus portal signings for college football teams, especially the Bears? Will look at Texas State, and I think theirs is like 95% transfer portal guys, if I remember correctly. Wasn't it that Texas State that did that?
Crazy, yeah.
Like their whole class basically was transfers or something along those lines. I forget. It's been a year or two now, but what do you think? Will that ever be the case for Baylor, a 50-50 type of portal/high school recruits? I would hope not. And I also think the rules are going to start to try and deflect teams away from getting away from the high school prospects because there are going to be coaches that just want to go all portal all the time. So I think the powers that be are concerned about that and the effect that could have on high school recruits. So I think there's going to be a concerted effort to try and curb some of that. I'll say no. I don't think it's going to be like that necessarily for Baylor, where it's 50-50 that way. I think there's always going to be, 80%, 85%, if not 90% will be recruits, and then, your handful of guys in a big year that you get from the transfer portal like last offseason.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you're saying. Baylor's not going to go away from recruiting high school prospects. And a big part of that is, beyond just evaluating and developing, which is so huge for a school like Baylor, it's also the relationships with these high school coaches is massive. If you start just going to the transfer portal, you're going to lose that. Mm-hmm. And it's going to really impact your team, especially if you miss on transfer portal prospects. You're in a world of hurt. So I just don't see it happening. Baylor's too much of a develop and scout kind of school that I don't see them going away from high school recruiting. It's too important for the lifeblood of the program.
Well, and it just conflicts too with Dave Aranda's whole mindset about, developing young men and players and whatnot, I think too. I mean, he's clearly happy to bring in guys from the portal, but I don't think that he'd love the idea of 90% of his roster are 1 and 2 year guys. That completely eliminates the ability to do the personal side of things the way that you would like to do, and what made them so unique last year and makes the program so unique right now is you got to have time for those relationships. So, and you even look at the 2 LSU guys he's brought in. I mean, Josh White could, in theory, be on campus for 3 years. It'll probably be more like 2, but, still, Siaki Ika is not a 1-year rental. He's back for year number 2. He could be back for year number 3, depending on how this year goes. So, they're not Drew Estrada was just the 1 year, but hey, you had a need at wide receiver. Here's a Texas kid, and boom, and he worked out pretty well. But yeah, I think for the most part, even the transfers they get, you're gonna hopefully have those guys for more than just a little rental period too. Thank you for the question, Bear Coog. If you won the lottery and wanted to be a big time sports donor to Baylor, what sport would you spend most of the money on, and what would it be used for? I'd go straight to Quidditch. I'd get I can't even name a piece of equipment to make a joke. I like the Harry Potter movies, but for some reason I'm
golden
blanking.
Snitch?
The golden. I'd buy the nicest golden snitches that you've ever seen in your life. Green and golden snitches, I guess. No. I mean, football would be tempting, but then again, is that just throwing your money down a big old drain because there's so much money already pouring through it? What about you, Grayson? What would you do?
I think I would do football just because it's the biggest money sport.
It makes the impact,
and it's the one that I go to the most games and enjoy watching the most. But I would say I think the most impactful would be basketball, though, because if you get 1 or 2 really good players on a basketball team, you're set up for success. But yeah, it'd be football for me.
Yeah, I would love to be able to have the kind of money to actually save something and pay my bills and then have that run over to go what sport am I going to donate these thousands or millions to? Yeah. I just want to one day, which will never happen, but just one day to be in that position that'd be something, man.
It would be.
That'd be a fun option to have to want to make. So yeah, probably football when all is said and done. Probably most people. Thank you for the question. It's interesting. Let's see. Bear on Glade, do you think the transfer portal usage will slow down maybe a little once the guys with a 6 year of eligibility all age out? I'm sure there's lots of progress stoppers with guys sticking around and keeping underclassmen off the field, and that's a very unique point. That COVID year, we kind of forget about that a little bit, but that thing is still around and still why you've got these log jams on rosters, and I do think that has created more of a traffic jam or a log jam, as you might say, than anything else, in terms of transfer portal and all of that.
I'd agree completely with that. And I think another kind of aspect of it is that schools are recruiting guys who are much older to their roster and then taking up a spot. So for instance, RJ Sneed, he's got an extra year, so he's going to Colorado to play his final year. So a freshman at Colorado is not going to play, or a sophomore at Colorado is not going to play, because RJ Sneed's there now. So that's another big problem, as well as these guys with their 6th or 7th year of eligibility going somewhere else and playing and taking up a spot. So yeah, I think it could a little bit. Once this, kind of COVID period ages out, I do think that a lot of prospects might reconsider because they might actually get some playing time and not get over-recruited by 6th year, 7th year guys.
Yeah, I mean, you can't hate it too much because otherwise you wouldn't have had Treston Ebner back last year, for example, or Jaron McVay even, or Raleigh Tejada, or, maybe even a couple of other guys that I'm not thinking of. But that's 3 right there that were all 6th year guys. And now 6 years were around before, too. They were just very unique circumstances. And you certainly didn't have basically 6-year guys on every roster in America, if not multiple 6-year guys on most rosters. So that did create a bit of a precarious situation, I think, for coaches, and it has created just this weird, it's like I say all the time, like I don't know what years guys are even in anymore. It's like you're a redshirt sophomore, but you've been on campus for 5 years somehow. It's like it's crazy. The way that it's kind of worked out, but
Squirrel still has some years of eligibility.
Yeah, like
left.
how?
Yeah.
I mean, dude's he just got his degree the other day. He's got like 3 years left, and it's crazy. But
his are medical and COVID, but
yeah,
still.
I mean, it's not just dragging it out by any means, or his choice to do that. But still, it is the 6-year bonus year, whatever, has made it very strange. So I do think it'll be nice when that kind of clears up. When exactly that happens, I don't know. But that'll be good to kind of get knocked loose and get the river flowing normally once again, instead of a bunch of logs piling up. All right, so thank you, Bear on Glade, for that question. Thank you to Bear Coog and Baylor 1984 and C. Midness and Julius and Scotty and Ashley and Gunny as well for your questions this week. Hopefully we answer those to your satisfaction, and some interesting questions this week that may go back and think about a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, as far as tough road games, and what do you think about other teams in the Big 12 and all that? I mean, the more the merrier as far as that discussion goes. We're hitting the summer months. We'll have tennis hopefully for a little while longer, and remains to be seen on some of the others. But it's been a good spring semester. A lot of kids going home now. A lot of young men and women going home after exams. Do you miss that time period?
Yeah, a little bit.
You do?
Well,
yeah, the long summer break of like 4 months.
I miss the going home part, not the school part.
Yeah.
Right? The feeling where, no responsibilities for like a little bit of time. And then, of course, internships and all that. But yeah, I miss it a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely missed the long school breaks. Those were very nice. But hey, a lot going on. Congrats to everybody finishing out their final exams, or welcoming your kids back from finishing their final exams, what have you. Thank you for the questions this week, and of course, thank you for listening as always, and thank you for subscribing to the premium section of Sic'Em 365. For those of you who do, listening and being on the boards and all that is the way to support us. So we do appreciate anybody who supports us in any form or fashion. Thanks to Armstrong and Jack behind the scenes as well. And Grayson, until next week, man, this has been the Bearcast. Appreciate everybody once again. We'll talk to you next week. I'm Craig Smoke for Grayson Grundhafer, Jack McKenzie, Armstrong Sims. This has been the Bearcast on Sic'Em365.com.